Welcome back to Let's Get Weird Together. This is a show where we talk about how going against societal norms, doing the weird thing is the best thing for the individual or for the collective. Um, First, I want to say I'm sorry I've been away for so long. I know I recorded 35 episodes and then dropped y'all like a hot potato. And it's been a while trying to get this restarted again. There's been a ton that's happened in my life and in the world, as you may have noticed. And as we go into season two, because I've decided to just start over with season two because it's a whole different energy that we're bringing. Season one was so much about the sexuality, releasing the shame, moving through things on a personal level, but we're going to go a little bit more global, a little bit more introspective with this season. You're going to see a lot more of my healers on. One thing that I thought was fascinating is like I was trying in August to get this rebooted. I've tried a few times, and there's been this resistance, this thickness, right? There's been like all these scheduling conflicts trying to get certain guests on. And what happened is about 3 days ago, I realized it's because it was time for this podcast to evolve a little bit as they do and shift the focus more to a different vibration, more into the sage mindset, sort of coming out of the dichotomy and the black and white and going from a little bit different perspective, which is really what I feel is called for in the coming year. So, a lot of the themes we're going to be working with is actually, especially for healers, how do we, or people who are holding space for other, or the leaders in our community, is how do we navigate all the changes that are coming up? Because it doesn't actually matter. It didn't matter which way the election went. We were going to have a lot of changes next year, no matter what. And so my focus right now is how do we create the space to keep our healers and our leaders and our community leaders where they need to be to help them help their people navigate this next year. So we're going to back up a little bit and just go over everything that's happened since I last dropped an episode. The main reason I paused was because I ended up doing IVF in Greece. It was an amazing experience. We actually did 2 rounds, but and it also came about kind of quickly once everything got going. And for those of you who've never done it, it's a pretty intense experience to go through, especially going to a country where only 3 weeks before I started to learn the alphabet. So it was a total crash course in the language. Yes, people spoke English, but I always love to learn as much as I possibly can over there to be polite. So there was a whole learning the new language, going through hormones. The way it worked, I was also going alone for the first week and a half. I did have friends join me on the first trip, but my partner wasn't there until we really needed him there. And it was interesting to see my mentality around this whole thing because it is really, really hard to be detached around something when you've been wanting it your whole life and you know that you're sort of in a Hail Mary situation and you're going somewhere to talk with specialists because the people in your own country don't want to work with people your age. There's a lot of things in it. But when things didn't work out the first time and we came back, the big thing that I learned after I'd processed all the emotions of it not working was this deeper understanding of my relationship to attachment of things. Because we don't talk about attachment and detachment in manifesting enough. I know I learned about being detached from manifestations back when I was learning sigil magic, like back in the 90s. And somehow we get into theta healing and we forget about having that conversation when it comes to manifesting. We have a lot of amazing conversations around detachment when it comes to healing others. Like a common thing that we reiterate over and over again in the classes as teachers is that, when someone's coming in for a healing, we have this faith, this belief that it's possible that it can happen for that person, right? We assume that because we witnessed it, then it happened, and we have this absolute faith that yes. But at this flip side, right, while we're expecting a healing to happen, we also have to be in a space of not being attached to whether it happens or not. And this is one of the base tenets, right? You have to let go of the accountability and the responsibility of if that person actually heals. Because when it comes to healing, the healer's doing everything they can to uncover the right beliefs to change and to ask the questions correctly and to witness it in the highest and best way from an expectation. But the truth is, the client's not going to heal unless they're ready to heal, they really want to heal, and they've removed all the blocks to healing. And so we spend a lot of time working with our ego, like letting go of the need for people to change, the need for them to actually heal, and acknowledging that our clients have free will and they can always choose not to heal. So we're great at that conversation, right? Really good at having that. And yet, when it comes to manifesting the thing that you want the most in the world, it can be a lot trickier to have that same level of detachment of like, I hope it happens, but I'm okay if it doesn't. Because a lot of times, the things that we're trying to manifest the hardest, we are very attached to them happening. And so between the first and the second round, I had that really big shift in making it okay in my body if it didn't happen. Because to be honest, before I was really attached to that happening. And this attachment, um, it can happen in other ways too. So there's attachment to um, manifesting something. And there's another interesting thing that I saw in manifesting this year, which was I was noticing that some of us have done this ourselves. When we're making the list of things we want to manifest, instead of manifesting our heart's desire and the thing that our soul really wants and things that would be fun, we're manifesting solutions to a problem. It's almost like some people will look at, here's the things that are wrong with my life, here's my pain, and I'm just going to manifest the opposite of that. And what that does is it puts the focus or the attachment onto the biggest problems in your life. And for some people, it's sort of a way to almost spiritually bypass themselves, that instead of working on the problem directly, they're like, I'm just going to have the universe solve this problem for me through manifesting. And what happens is then they get very, very attached to when I magically manifest this thing, when I manifest this thing through meditation, then that will automatically solve this other thing, as opposed to if you hit the problem head on, the situation in your life, the relationship, the disease, the lack of money. If you do the work to release the beliefs that were caused that in the first place, then you're automatically going to manifest something even greater. And it's easier said than done for sure, but part of it is having that understanding that even in ourselves, we can't out manifest our subconscious beliefs, right? So you need to look at, why is it that I want to manifest this thing? Am I manifesting it because really when I sit with my heart, it's what I most want? Or am I working to manifest this thing because it's going to solve a problem? Because if you're manifesting it because you want it to solve a problem, then therefore you're going to have an attachment to it and you're going to care whether it happens or not. Which leads us to another thing to think about when it comes to attachment. Something we teach in basic and in advanced, and as we talk about doing future readings, it can be kind of hard to do a future reading on yourself when you're attached to the outcome. If you are attached to this thing happening or not happening for you, that attachment in your mind and your brain is going to cloud the future readings that you're getting. And that's one of the reasons why it's really good to go to another healer and get an outside perspective on if the thing that you want to happen is going to happen or not. If you are asking questions about things that you're detached from if it happens or not, you're going to get a very clear answer. But if you need to have 10 people in that class in order for you to pay your bills, or if you need to have something happen in order for you to have your health, if the manifestation is, if you're dependent on the manifestation changing your life in some way, then it's going to be harder to get a really clear vision on if it's going to happen and what you need to do for it. And so how do we come out of detachment or attachment? How do we become detached? So what works for me is me understanding, why do I have this attachment? What is important? And also looking at, if this thing that I'm attached to, if it happens, what is the positive thing I'm going to get out of it? Because what we're doing when when we're getting attached to things happening or not happening, is we're making it mean something if it happens for us. And we're making it mean something about us if it doesn't happen. So you want to go to that meaning, that thing that we're making it mean about ourselves, and solve for that first and heal that part of you. Because once you've done that, once you know that you can already be fulfilled, you can already be abundant, you can always be joyful, you can already be loved, even if you don't get the thing, then you can come from a place of working with the universe of like, I'd like to have this thing. Let's work towards it and see what happens. On the flip side of that, because I've been working apparently on detachment for 2 years, or for a few years now, and I've had many, many layers of things coming through. Because in my younger days, I was able to make things happen because I wanted to. And I had to learn, and I was still in that energy last year when I was putting forth my retreat. And what I didn't recognize is that at one point in the process, people were in agreement and it was the right thing, but things had slipped and it was no longer the right thing. But because I'm so good at making things happen, right? I was in my ego. I still made it happen, even though it was no longer in alignment. Because I'm like, but I can make things happen. I'm great at making things happen. And I've learned a lot of really beautiful humility around, learning when to make things happen because it's what the collective wants and the collective is ready for, versus making things happen because everyone's in agreement and it's what we all want. Because looking back at a lot of those things that I made happen, I'm also looking at how much support showed up, which didn't show up in this other instance. So that's been the big lessons, right? Oh, and also working with the collective was interesting. My pocketbook really wanted me to teach these particular classes over the summer. The plan was to teach planes of existence, DNA 3, and disease and disorder, which are all high-level theta healing classes. You have to have been through intuitive anatomy for those, just to have the space in your body to be able to do the things. Because you have to have processed a certain amount of your trauma and your ancestors' trauma to be able to really work with this material. And I felt like I was ready. It felt like a good time, but all of my clients and my students were like, nah, we don't feel like learning in the summer. And it was interesting to move it all to, we're actually in disease and disorder right now, and understanding that even though it went against what I wanted, for the students that are in it and for what we're going through right now as a nation, it's actually the perfect time to be holding this class. Because the way that I teach and the way that I hold space as a teacher is, I find I very intuitively put classes in times of stress, because there's some students who, there's two different perspectives on being in these classes and healing. Some people like to be in these classes when everything's fine and they feel like they have the space to learn the new things. But I tend to draw in a lot of students who would rather be in a class when everything's falling apart for them, when they're at a moment of stress, so that they have the support, because they understand that these classes are places of deep transformation and healing. And as far as the mental learning of the technique, they know that they're going to get it because they're also disciplined and will read the book after class ends. And that's one thing that people kind of get backwards about this. Because I know I had it at one point where I was under the perception that you had to have conquered basic and known everything about basic before you went into advanced, as opposed to realizing that these classes are transformative experiences. And when you're in the experience, you will gain the understanding, and the knowledge will come as you've released the blocks that you need to release from having the healings in class. So from that perspective, it made sense, even though I was upset at the time, why everything had to move. But on the flip side, that also opened up the space for me to write my book. It's 80% finished, and we're going to be talking about it more in future podcasts. And it is going to be turned into a whole online series. So you can either like take it as a class, but it's boundaries for business owners. And I can see why energetically I've been working the last 3 years on the topic of boundaries. Because boundaries have a lot to do with self-respect, holding space for yourself, having compassion for yourself, and also having the right amount of compassion for others and knowing when to hold space for others in different ways and when to protect yourself. And so it's been an interesting 3 year process of writing this because basically I've been thinking about it. I've been leading classes and workshops on it just to integrate the material a little bit more. And then I finally did the bulk of the writing this summer. So there'll be more thoughts on that. I'm actually going to be in the new year teaching it as a series of workshops. And what's been really fascinating is with scheduling, right? I'm a Virgo. I love to schedule, I love to plan. And and I also love to do readings. And so when I do a future reading on global events, what I get is I get a percentage, right? It's 58%, 38%, like a different percentage of how likely it is to happen. And I planned my 2025 schedule in August when the percentages went a different way. And when I wasn't looking, when I was actually in Greece and thinking about myself and like doing the whole IVF thing. So I wasn't tuned into the collective. Everything switched. And what's really interesting is I'm called on to teach different classes now than I was before because the collective consciousness shifted. And the big message I've been getting the last 3 weeks is I'm like, I feel like it's time to plan my year, but I keep getting the message to like hold off. You don't have the right information yet. And it's been really cool that I allowed myself to drag my feet because I did have to change everything from what I thought it was going to be. Like for the boundaries for business class, I kept wanting to do it on a Wednesday, on a Tuesday, on a Monday night. I was really wanting to, and right from the place of me, what's best for me, um, put it on a weeknight. And it's interesting how like all these different moments when I go into my new community that I've grounded in here in Columbus, I'm like, oh, I can't do Tuesdays because there's a really awesome thing on Tuesdays. And just being in the listening right now of what are the things that are going on that are already being created that I'm going to join. In my past, I was the one who created the different communities, and it's been interesting to let go of control and realize it's what's in my highest and best, and the collective's highest and best right now is not for Marie to create right now any new groups, but for Marie to join and be a part of and lend stability towards these different groups. So that's been a really beautiful lesson, and honestly, really relaxing because if you've ever been a community organizer, you know, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. And also maybe recognizing that the way that I built community in the past is not what's being called on for the most part because I do have strong opinions on things and recognizing like as a leader how much of that I bring to the table and learn and I'm kind of unlearning a little bit of that and learning how to bring a broader perspective to everything I do. And my Tuesday conversations have been with this new group of an instrumental in helping me learn how to be a leader from a broader perspective. So with that, I do want to talk about the election a little bit. The one thing that I knew for sure as I sat with my group on Tuesdays, we had this amazing moment of knowing that we were all connected and brought together for a reason. We didn't know yet how things were going to turn out, but the consensus was no matter what happened, it was going to be for the highest and best for the country eventually, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. Because what happens is the collective consciousness really truly is democratic. When I teach about how to change the weather, I actually talk about democracy because that is something that happens, right? So collectively, we've decided, or we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, it's so rainy today, or there's a cloud or two. Or it's usually more democratic when it's lighter weather, right? An example would be I was having a little bit of a migraine one day, and I kept moving the clouds in front of the sun in my house. And my mom is only, a couple miles away, right? She lives really close. So same clouds. She wanted it to be sunny and she kept moving the clouds away. And she actually texted me. She's like, the clouds keep covering the sun. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing that. Like, because I have a headache and like I want it to be cloudy and she wanted it to be sunny. So there is this thing that when we put energy into our world, we're basically voting for how we want it to be. And so when it comes to, weather systems, there is also the natural order and divine timing that comes into it. But to a degree, we can sort of shift things a little bit. And so in our collective consciousness, which if you're not familiar with this concept, right, there's different levels of consciousness. Like you have your own individual consciousness. Inside of your family shares genetic beliefs, so that's one level of consciousness. Inside of community and states is another level of consciousness. And I think I love road trips. This is really fun when you are driving across the state line. If you tune in, you can actually feel the shift of consciousness from being a Buckeye to being a Hoosier, right? You can literally feel as you go from one state to another that this each individual state and territory is creating its own consciousness. And so as a nation, we have voted in our collective consciousness and actually literally if you go and voting of what we want to work through. And I honestly believe that the way things turned out is really amazing because of what it's bringing to the surface. There was an interesting thing that happened, and especially in some of the Ohio people that I went to high school with. When we elected Barack Obama, there's a lot of people who took that to mean we have a black president. That means, congratulations, we did it. We don't have a problem with racism in the US anymore. Look, Barack is black. That's no longer an issue. We are now in a post-racist society. And, if you talk to your black friends, if you talk to your friends who are people of color, you may find that that's not exactly the truth or that's not their perspective. But a good portion of the nation adopted that belief that we've moved beyond this. We have proof that we're beyond this. And there's been a lot of different beliefs, different feelings that have been sort of pushed down within the collective. And one thing that we know is true in theta healing is that we can't change a belief if we don't believe that it exists. Right? If we don't acknowledge that a belief is alive in a person, right? So it's on one-on-one sessions. If you're like, no, I don't believe that, that's not true, then it's not going to change. And that's one of the reasons why we use muscle testing is because sometimes we don't even know what we believe. The way beliefs work is you have the beliefs you're conscious of, right? Your conscious mind is 12%, 12% of everything you believe. So you have 88%. It's your subconscious, things that you don't know, beliefs that you do not realize are even active inside of you. And so if we don't know that the problem is there, if we haven't acknowledged it, then we can't heal it. And so even in this last week, it's been amazing to see some of the beliefs that are being emboldened, some of the things that are coming up that when people see someone saying something like, your body, my choice, that they can feel into, do I resonate with that? And do I want to release that from myself? Is that a belief I really want to, is that something I really believe? And sometimes when these things come up, when people are saying, like there's the University of Texas, there were some protesters who were actually wanting to bring back slavery, literally saying that slaves and women are types of property. And these are very bold, bold statements. And what's interesting, even the best of people who they don't consciously believe that, what happens is when someone says something and you get really triggered by it, then then it's usually because, or oftentimes it can be because there's a part of you that 0.001% in your genetics somewhere might actually resonate with that. And we get angry when we hear that we resonate with that truth. And it's not to say that people who get angry about this think, want slavery back or think that, their body is someone else's choice in a way that is something that they want to create. The anger can actually be because of a sadness, because an ancestor does resonate with that and you want it to be healed. I had a really great conversation with a fellow theta healer who's going to come out in a couple of weeks. And I asked them, what's the best thing that we can do right now? And it really is about doing the self work, especially in these next few weeks. So it is about feeling into these things that make me angry in the collective. Did some ancestor actually resonate with that? Am I actually contributing? Am I actually voting, with my belief system for that? And ancestral work can take a little bit of work. It's fun. I love doing it. I'm a medium, so it's always been easy for me to go talk to ancestors. But part of it is recognizing, why do I have this resonance with this belief that is ugly, with this belief that consciously is horrible and I don't want to believe? And going back and having compassion for your ancestors and releasing them from that belief, which releases you from that belief, which releases it from the collective consciousness. So the more that we go back into our ancestries and release these heavy beliefs, these beliefs that make us sad, it heals our family line. And then it also helps us vote in the collective consciousness to no longer believe that. This is one of the reasons why when I was resetting my schedule for next year, I put the world relations class right there in the beginning of the year, before the votes are even counted, before everything's ratified, because I want to make sure that my students, and it's mostly going to be repeats, is what I'm feeling too, and from talking to people, they're just ready to go through and release all those ancestral resentments and angers and fears on a deeper level so that we can help shift the collective in the way that it really needs to go. Because when people feel disempowered, the best thing I can do as a healer, because again, I'm not a political activist, that's not my genius zone. The way that I lead is literally by having these deep one-on-one conversations and helping people transform. And as we transform ourselves, we transform the collective. And so when we feel disempowered, it's best to go and see, what can I heal on myself? And this is not to victim blame or to be like, your feelings are your problems. It's more like, in what way am I contributing to this collective consciousness? And in which way can I contribute in a better way that's going to move the country in the way that I feel is the best for us? And we'll probably talk more about that. Please write your questions in the comments so we can open up a dialogue. The other thing that I really want to talk about when it comes to collective consciousness is the last pandemic. I say last because we're ripe for a new one. So Global events like wars and pandemics is basically when the collective consciousness is trying to really shift us in a big way and move things in a big way. And because humans don't always learn things the easy way, we sometimes need really extreme events to move things quickly and to really bring those lessons in. And so what happens is we will co-create these big, uncomfortable, painful experiences in order for us to really understand the need for change. If you look at what happened during COVID, the first vibration of COVID was pure fear. And just to back up, for those who haven't had this conversation before, every microbiome, every disease has a vibration and it resonates with us. So if you are in resonance with the virus, it can come in and take root and be like, hey, we're besties. And so as a theta healer, in order to heal a virus, we heal the vibration that caused the resonance with the virus. And when you release that resonance, the virus becomes harmless. And so the first resonance was fear. It was if you went into the human body and really looked at COVID, it always looked to me like a bird that flew into the house and was terrified and just wanted you to open up the window and let it out. And so that was why that first 3 months, all I did was like fear release sessions with people and helping people come out of the shock and trauma of it. Then it sort of settled in because that's the thing is viruses are amazingly complex and beautiful. Um, they have such a high intelligence that new psychics will sometimes mistake them for possession. I've had students come and be like, "Oh, so and so's this." I'm like, "No, they're not. They just have like literally 5 viruses in them." And so it's about really understanding the difference between the two. So as it progressed, it got smarter, learned not to kill people so quickly because the goal is never to kill. They really want to have a parasitic kind relationship with us. And they don't want to make us sick, but that's sort of how they operate. And viruses do actually intermingle with our DNA. So it's a very, very deep relationship, which is why when you change your belief system, you can resonate out of that. So the next level was I am unworthy of being alive. I'm unworthy of kindness. I'm unworthy of being treated fairly, right? It's very much that, so people who've been feeling put down in a particular way for hundreds of years, for generations, were the most susceptible for that. If they resonated with, I'm unworthy to even be here. That was the first mutation that we went through. And and which is interesting because that also happened right when there was a lot of riots. So it was showing up in people protesting, but also showing up on an emotional level in how the virus resonated with humanity. And then, so we were working through that, and it's interesting, like we started to work remote, things started to loosen up a little bit. We started to bring more kindness in because of that. The next two variants were really interesting because it shifted to a whole different population where it was like, I am unworthy of the work that I'm doing or doing the work that I want. Either people were already doing what they loved, but they were having imposter syndrome or felt like they weren't worthy of doing it or they shouldn't be there, or they couldn't even move into the work that they wanted to do because they felt they had to stay in their current work. And when that happened, you saw a lot of people rage quitting. You saw a lot of people starting new businesses. You saw a lot of people shifting or just really coming into their own in their work. And then the third variant that came about was when people started to believe, who am I? Or the vibration of, who am I to be that famous, to have this big of a stage, to take up this much space in the earth? So that was more about people being resistant to growing, to expanding, and to coming into their own in a much bigger way. And so when you look at it that way, it was a pretty fascinating series of events that led to us coming out of that. But not everything was resolved because what happened is you also had this other side, a lot of people who, so it brought balance for some of us, but there's a lot of people who felt really, 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 really unheard. And that's one of the vibrations that's coming about right now is this like you had people who before were feeling unworthy of existence, unworthy of existing the way they wanted to exist. And now there is a lot of people who feel like they got shouted down, or maybe they were shouted down. There were some extreme emotions. So we sort of swung the pendulum the other way, where there was a lot of shouting down, a lot of people feeling unheard, a lot of people with their voices not being heard in a lot of different ways. Because I also too, the use of masks was really triggering to people in an interesting way because so we're also going to see coming up the vibration of erasure. And so the reason I say the last pandemic is because Viana predicted it, and I can actually really see how likely it could be. It's not guaranteed, right? It's still wibbly wobbly. It's still kind of like sort of phasing in and out of, if it's going to happen, because, we're still rewriting the future. We have opportunities as we come together as a collective, as healers heal more, as we heal our ancestry. We have the opportunity to shift the trajectory of where we're going to go. But what feels likely this week is that within the next 3 years, that as these people are, as a collective, as we're working through the fear, because there's a lot of fear right now, similar amounts of fear that we had in 2016, but there's fear on all sides. So we have the fear, we have the feelings of feeling unheard, we have people feeling unseen, people feeling erased, people feeling they don't have the right to feel how they feel. Yeah, and especially I'm getting a lot of the erasure seems really big right now. People who, when we were tumbling the statues, right? And they're like Southern heritage is being erased. And so it's now time for that to be healed in whatever way it needs to be healed. So between the fear and the erasure, it feels like very likely that a virus is going to come about to help us deal with that. And it is going to be the one, it's interesting that I actually have like a little bit of a froggy throat. It is going to be one that affects the vocal cords and how we speak and losing our voice. So, what do we do with all this information as we look forward to how the collective consciousness is looking to rebalance things and swing the pendulum the other way? And hopefully without overcorrecting too much. Because that is a truth. We do it on all levels. We do it on a personal level. We do it as a society where things swing one way and we overcorrect so hard. An example of overcorrection is when you finally realize that, your mom unintentionally may have caused trauma. Like when we start to do the trauma work, we're like, oh my gosh, these people hurt me. And when you call them up and yell at them for things that they didn't even remember happened. So it's a natural tendency to overcorrect because overcorrection helps us feel like we're doing something and helps the anger in our body. And I've done an entire podcast on anger. And when I get into my forgiveness book, we will talk about it, but that's much, much later. The last thing I wanted to talk about today, as we're looking forward, as we're looking into everything that's going to come, because I've been talking to my healer friends, and I think because we haven't decided as a collective exactly what's going to happen, what we have right now, besides the likeliness of a pandemic, what we have right now is we know when things are going to happen, right? Because there are divine timing moments. Astrologically, there's times where we have big change, but we have the free will to shift what exactly is going to happen. But the one thing that we know is next year is going to be a year of a lot of transitions, especially in March. There's going to be a lot of disruptions, or not a lot. There will be disruptions in January. But as we look forward to these things, how as healers and community leaders do we prepare ourselves? And it's interesting. I actually kind of jumped the gun because I love to take action because we know taking action makes us feel safe for a lot of people. It makes us feel like we're doing something. And I changed my pricing. I opened up my schedule. And then afterwards, I got the message. I'm like, not yet. Nobody needs you yet, which is fine. Because there's a lot of people who, on all sides, we don't know how we feel yet. And that's perfectly fine. So if you're listening and you don't know how you feel, that's great. You're in great company. A lot of people don't know how to feel yet, and that's okay. Because we're in this sort of holding pattern of feeling into things. So the most important thing for us to do as healers and community leaders is to really work on our foundations, making sure that your home is really working for you. So it's a good time to, if you need to take an action, to deep clean, reset it, repaint. Make sure that it is a place that is supporting you. Gather your tribe, get together with your people, your community that's going to support you, but also get together with a community that has more than one perspective. Set down a really good self-care regimen now. As healers, as community leaders, when we're there for other people, however you hold space for other people, some of us have a tendency, especially those of us who love being of service, of putting everyone else first, and it's unsustainable. And I think we saw in the last pandemic what happened was like it was like 6 months and 18 months in, there was like actual points in time where we were being there for everyone else so hard that we got sick, that we collapsed, and the pendulum swung the other way. And it feels like this process is going to happen a little bit differently. It may not be as sudden. It may be more of a marathon instead of a series of sprints. So figuring out what works for you as far as keeping you stable, keeping you balanced. And it may be that you're going to have less time available than you did last time because you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself really, really well cared for. For me, and it's going to look different for everyone. So for me, it really means like really prioritizing exercise and aesthetic dance and getting into my sauna. Um, and also I am in the process, which I started before all this shifted, of redoing the entire house. For some people, I know they actually have a formula because making it mathematical makes it easier for them. For every X number of hours they put into the community, they put a number, they give a number back to themselves. But really being disciplined in that now is going to be very good. Because here's one thing that's true about people who are of service, especially healers, especially if we are still carrying the subconscious belief from our ancestors that we have to heal the world, that we have to heal people. So the first thing is like releasing those beliefs and going from I have to heal to I choose to heal. So really examining everywhere in your subconscious where there's a have to and making it a choice and softening it. But also being aware of the fact that community leaders and healers tend to overextend ourselves. We tend to have a little bit of adrenal fatigue. And besides the fact that it wears down your body, all that extra cortisol isn't good for you. What happens is when you are in adrenal fatigue, is in order to stay present or to stay moving or to get the energy that you need because you're so overworked, we give into anger. And anger is not the emotion we need. Anger is amazing, right? It's a beautiful emotion that motivates you, it gets you going. It's what helps you recognize the hurt that you're feeling, the pain that you're feeling inside. So it's not a bad thing unless you're using anger to get through the day. And that's part of the reason why you have sort of angry healers out there is we get, and I've been in that vibration before, is we get ourselves overextended. We wear ourselves down. We have poor boundaries. We're not taking time for ourselves. We're not really nourishing us so that we can be there in a place of detachment, a place of ease for our clients. So, in order to help you stay stable through the next 3 years, is what I'm feeling of how long the process is going to be, is to make sure that you're doing that self-care, that you're knowing when to put yourself first, so that you don't go into that adrenal fatigue that is so common in leaders. Because really, the best three things is to be prepared, to do your self-care, and to stay open and to stay aware. Because nobody's completely right in these challenges. We're right about some things, but we all need, when we're ready for it, a little bit deeper listening. And it's really hard to listen when you're angry. So, in order to really be a part of the dialogue coming up, you do need to make sure, maybe you don't need to, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making sure that I'm really coming from a really, really solid foundation of self-care, self-introspection, and also making sure that I am not living in an echo chamber, which doesn't mean that you have to be with people who aren't ready to be in the dialogue. There are a lot of people in this world who are ready to have the deep conversations from a place of non-judgment. So I urge you to seek out at least one or two understanding people who have a perspective different from yours, because that's how we're going to get through this, is through understanding other people's perspectives and coming to a common ground. All right. I know I went all over the place with that. This might be a little bit of a longer one. Thank you for listening. Like I said, again, going forward, I'm going to be calling in more healers and more leaders to get their different perspectives. I'm definitely going to be looking for perspectives that are different from mine and holding space for them. And definitely the tone is definitely going to be coming from a place of understanding and listening and wisdom as we move forward. So some of the people that I recorded in August, I'm not sure when, that they may, so a couple of people might be saved for season 3, but we'll see. All right, beautiful souls, thanks for hanging in there. Stay open, stay amazing, and we'll see you next week.